Today, many will be waking up, some going to work for the first time in a number of weeks, and some of you listening will be staying at home, possibly because you feel it is not safe to go to work, or you're working in an industry which has not been permitted to return back to work. Regardless, I think that the sentiment coming after Boris Johnson's speech last night has been that of somewhat of confusion. You might not be sure if you can visit a family member. Are you allowed to visit 2 family members? Can you go to the park? Do you have to exercise in a park? I hope I don't have to exercise in the park, but in all seriousness, if you're wondering what is allowed to be done, what you can do, I hope that Peter Taylor, our Mayor for Watford, can help shed some light. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Benji. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. A bit bunged up with a hay fever, but, you know, that's just another reason for me to stay indoors, to be quite honest with you. Listen, let's not beat around the bush this evening. People are looking for answers, and hopefully you can help shed some light and explain. Let's start with meeting relatives, because that's what I think will be at the top of people's agenda. Who can I meet and where can I meet them, Peter?
Yeah, I think you're right that lots of people are trying to get clarity about that, and Watford Council's in exactly the same situation.
Right.
That we have obviously big government announcements, and then we've got to look at all the detail that underpins that and make sure that we're enforcing it and following out the rules properly. So I think there's still quite a lot of work to do to clarify lots of this. I saw Piers Morgan interviewing a Conservative MP today, and he was asking about, can I visit my 2 sons? And it was, there wasn't clarity on that. So from our point of view, we're still trying to get more guidance. I think this afternoon the government put out a question and answer document that tried to clear up some of these things, and we'll be looking really closely at that. From my perspective, the key thing now is thinking about, okay, we're gradually going to see an easing of some of the restrictions. So obviously our parks have always been open, but some of the car parks, like for example at Cassiobury Car Park, car park has been closed, and we will be looking to reopen that and other car parks over the next few days so that people are able to access our parks more easily. But I think the key thing is to remember that there is still a global pandemic, that people still need to follow the NHS advice, stay 2 metres apart from others. If you are meeting others, which you may now be able to do that you couldn't previously, you still need to follow the health advice about washing your hands, keeping a distance to stop the spread of the virus. So
just on that car park thing, because the guidance coming out from Boris Johnson last night is you can drive unlimited amounts to get your exercise or whatever, but you don't want everyone driving to Brighton to sit on the beach. So are you going to open the car parks or are you not? Or is that something you're in the middle of deciding?
Our plan is to open them.
Yep.
So they would be opened in the next few days. So places like Cassiobury Park, the car park there will be opened. We'll keep it under review. The key thing for us is to monitor the numbers going into the park and to see if social distancing is still happening. But we are going to look to open that. And the other thing is some of the parking restrictions more generally. So busy roads like St Albans Road or Whippendale Road, we've not been enforcing the yellow lines strictly. I think as we return to some kind of normality, then we're going to start to enforce those again, so that people can visit the shops in the way that they used to. So we'll see a gradual kind of change back to how things used to be, but constantly monitoring the impact and making sure that people are still keeping safe and that we're not seeing any increase in the number of coronavirus cases.
Well, that's really important because people at the moment think there's no parking restrictions, so they need to keep an eye on your social media platforms. If they're not online, maybe they can call a friend or relative who is online, buy a local paper, listen to Vibe 107.6. I think it's worth us chatting again if you're around on Thursday when I'm next on air, because these are measures that are changing day by day, and we need to let Watford residents know so that they don't get slapped with a 60 quid fine for parking in a space that they thought was okay to park in. Matthew Jones has got in touch on Twitter, and he says, what are the plans for changes to local road layouts to give more space to cyclists and pedestrians following government statutory guidance regarding network management in response to COVID-19? Let me just translate that a little bit for people that might not be au fait with statutory guidance. I'm certainly not. Boris Johnson said last night, if you can get to work without public transport, or you can use a bike or walk, then do. I'm concerned about more bikes on the road as a car driver. How can you kind of calm the nerves of people who are getting on bikes so they're not risking their lives?
Yeah, it is about getting a balance, and so we're in lots of discussions with Hertfordshire County Council about how we can make sure that this works, because one of the consequences, if you've got people being told, don't travel by bus but travel by car, or travel by bike, then you're thinking, well, obviously both lots more cars and more bikes on the same amount of road space is potentially a problem. So we're having lots of discussions with the County Council about how can we make that work. You'll know that we introduced our bike hire scheme in the spring. That's been a huge success. It's free for people that work for the NHS. Of course, they're washing their hands before and after the bikes or wearing gloves. But we're seeing lots of, hundreds of people using those every day, which is really positive. Just going back to your point about parking fines, one of the things that we're really conscious of is if we do change the rules, obviously we want to communicate that as much as possible. But initially, when we first make the changes, rather than issuing people with fines, we'll put leaflets explaining that the rules have changed as kind of a first warning.
That is a brilliant idea. That is a great idea.
So just so that your listeners are clear. But yeah, it's going to be difficult. And the other thing is, of course, people may, if they're not travelling by bus and they don't have a car, they may choose to travel by taxi. And we're working with the taxi businesses locally to try to make sure they can adapt really quickly by putting in screens, having the back of the taxis cleaned with sanitizer so that people know they can travel safely. So we're trying to be as proactive as we can, working with people to make the best of quite a difficult situation.
And I think just going back to there's a few clear points that you've outlined to us so far. That's parks, Cassio-Bury Park, car park could be reopening, probably will. That's what I'm getting from you. The parking fines, you're not going to be slapped with 60 quid overnight. You will be told about it. Maybe if you're parking in a space which you thought was free, log on to the council website as you're pulling up your handbrake. Just double check if things have changed. And taxis, that's great. Oh, and the free bikes. Now another thing, and if you are around on Thursday, it'd definitely be great to have you back on, Peter, because I think things are changing. But the thing that people are worried about at the moment, one really big subject, is schools. What can you tell us about schools in Hertfordshire, or Watford rather?
Yeah, so the same as in the rest of the country, that it will be a phased return. So the Prime Minister said from June it looks like Year 6's reception in Year 1, so the youngest children at primary school and those at the oldest year starting to return, and then also for secondary school focusing on Year 10 and Year 12, so the children that are starting their GCSEs and A-levels, because those are such critical years, returning them. So it will be a staged return. As a father with kids that are at primary school, kind of keeping a close eye on it myself. But I think that's most likely. And of course they will keep looking, they talk about this R figure, the rate at which the number of cases is increasing or falling, and as long as it keeps falling, then we'll see a gradual return of different age groups to schools. I mean, it does create difficulties for families, I know. If you've got someone living at home with an underlying health condition, I think it's important that schools are as flexible and understanding as possible, because each household has a different set of circumstances, and it might not always be possible to return if you've got someone living at home with a mental health, with a health condition, for example.
Now, just before that song, we were having a quick chat about the measures the easing of lockdown, car parking restrictions. We talked about car parks and picnics and Castleberry Park reopening, and of course Watford's cycle scheme, which is free for NHS users. Just remember to wash your hands, clean your bike and all of that. Now, for many over 70s, and you may be at home, stuck at home for the last few months, you might be hearing about the measures from Boris Johnson and you might be thinking, nah, not for me. I don't want to leave the house until a vaccine is sorted and things are a bit more under control. Now, Peter, we've got Watford Helps. Tell us a bit about what that is.
Yeah, so Watford Helps has been organised by Watford Council, working with W3RT, and we've had over 1,300 people sign up, I think, including yourself. Yep. And those volunteers are doing brilliant things, making sure that people have got food, helping collect medicines, also making phone calls to residents and having just a nice chat with them. So loads has been going on, and it's been a really positive thing.
And that's quite right. If you're listening at home and you're thinking, I do need a bit of help, nothing is too big or too small for Watford Helps to deal with. And yeah, as Peter's saying, I'm one of the volunteers. I ring up some vulnerable people and some people who just want some human contact. I mean, are you aware, and you must be, of course you are, of how isolated and how alienated some people in Watford will feel from this easing of lockdown, if you can call it that?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I make some of the calls myself, and you chat to residents who, some of them are finding it really difficult. Loneliness is a problem at the best of times, and this obviously has made it far worse. And so we're doing what we can. We're making those phone calls. There's also, of course, the Watford Together initiative, which has been really good, bringing together people like Vibe Radio and our local paper and the Palace Theatre and the Pump House to put on events online and to try and keep people connected, because it is a tough time, and I'm really conscious of that.
And I've got to say, in Watford, there's this real sense of community and coming together, and I think it's just really about when we can see each other physically and life starts becoming busier again, which I say with a groan because I'm quite enjoying this time, in a strange way, of course. Not, there's some horrific things happening, but having the time as well to reflect is important. I guess it's about harnessing that community and keeping it around, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's really true. We've seen some, lots of people volunteering, lots of people donating to charity, people making new connections. I think there's, renewed appreciation for people like that work in our NHS, who are carers, who are teachers. So you're right that it's a really tough period of time, but there are definitely some positives. And I think that in the future we want to make sure that Watford's always been a place with a brilliant sense of community. But if anything, that's been strengthened over the last few weeks, and we want to build on that in the future, yeah.
Definitely, and I think one big party at Vicarage Road for all our NHS workers will go down really well. If you're looking for someone to present it, I don't know anyone good enough. We'll have to ask Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby. Peter, it's great to talk to you, and we're hoping you might be able to join us again on Thursday to give us an update.
I'll be very happy to, Benji, no problem.
Brilliant, thank you. Peter Taylor there, the Watford Mayor, keeping us abreast of the changing situation with the gentle easing of lockdown, and I hope he will be able to join us on Thursday to update us as the situation changes. You're listening to Vibe 107.6. It's Benji on Drive.